So everyone, welcome to the Sheldon Jackson Museum. We're so pleased to bring you our latest artist in residence of the program. Tina just arrived yesterday afternoon and hit the ground running. We will begin with a few general announcements before she starts her presentation to you all. I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. We always do that. We'd like to acknowledge and express our appreciation to the indigenous people of Plinketani who have occupied this land for longer than any of us can imagine, and who after 250 years of colonization are sharing this land with us graciously. So Tina Harness first learned to bead at her auntie Toon's house. She was 6 years old when she put a cookie tin full of seed beads in front of her, threaded some dental floss into a needle, and sat down to make a necklace. This concept of working on a project to finish with a wearable piece of art threw her into a spiral of creative flow. She quickly took on this identity as her own. She spent hours in her room developing patterns and designs, pushing the boundaries of what she had seen as a small girl. You can see she continued that process if you come up to her work table. She sold her necklaces, bracelets, and earrings at her mom's office, walking from person to person, smiling and telling them about her art. She learned the importance of money management and self-motivation. She took her earnings and put them back, her earnings and put them back into business, into her own business. Throughout college, Harness took whatever art class she could. She learned from amazing painters, sculptors, and graphic designers. Each mentor she came across gave her incredible feedback on her art style and technique, teaching her more than she could have taught herself. Harness had a small showing in 2010 at the University of Alaska Anchorage Student Art Gallery when her classmates chose her self-portrait to display at the end of the year art show. What an honor to be chosen by your peers. Since then, she has worked with students at a week-long art camp in Bethel, where a handful of students and she created 2 giant masked dancer puppets out of fabric and paper mache. In 2023, she taught a long-standing 2-week art camp in Bethel, where youth get to paint a handful of the local dumpsters as a small-town beautification project started by a former high school art teacher. This job was particularly important to Harness as she grew up watching this camp take place and understood its importance to the local community and the youth being raised there. This year, in addition to being an artist in residence at the Sheldon Jackson Museum, she's working with the Alaska Native Heritage Center teaching youth beading classes, establishing a strong foundation for anyone to branch off and explore their own bead weaving journey. She would like to keep the momentum forward with Yupik youth and community mentorship in the creative arts. She herself is part Yupik and part Caucasian, and prior to coming here to Sitka, she worked at the Burke Museum in Seattle. So we're excited to see what she'll do, and her work is just beautiful and lovely. We do have calendars available for people to take if you wish, or to take a look at. It'll show you the days and times she's working, and Tina is also teaching a beading class to make earrings, which is full, I believe. There might be one spot left. And she'll give an artist talk on September 20th, and then on the 27th, another talk, and October 2nd, do a really interesting journaling activity with a focus on writing and journaling for healing. So just a wonderful whole host of programs and events, not to mention working with 4-H youth and volunteering at the Pioneer Home while she's here. So we're so fortunate to have Tina here through the Alaska Native Artist Residency program. That program is made possible with support from the Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hammerhand Foundation, and private donors. If you're interested in supporting the program, you can talk to the office manager who's here at the back at JJ Carlson. Thank you so much, Tina, for being here. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks for that introduction. It was really long. I didn't know it was been that long, but that's great. So, hello, my name is Tina. Let me just jump in here. You kind of saw the introductory slide there. We're going to go to the next one. So, Wapa, Wina Jukshawa. So, Cupell'aq is my Yupik name. Tina Marie is my English name. My mother is Susan Nick from Nunapachuk, Alaska. Her parents are Elena and Nico Nick from the same region. My father is Bill or William Harness from Seattle, Washington, and his parents are Frida Maddox and William Harness as well from the lower 48. So I grew up up between rural Bethel and south of Los Angeles in Loma Linda, California. So since a little girl, I was kind of going back and forth between those two very, very different communities. And I feel like it gave me a really good base of who I am and my character today as an adult, and seeing these two different worlds and having to kind of like flow between the two of them. So that's a little bit about me. So what I wanted to talk to here, when I was thinking about it, I was filling out the application, I was thinking about it, and I was like, what can I talk about? You know, I'm an artist. I feel like I'm not really like an activist or a voice of any sort, but what is it that draws my passion and what makes me an artist today? And what it really is knowing that back in the day, you found art in everyday life. In when my grandma was being raised, when my mom was being raised, I think that's kind of, my mom's generation was where it started to fall off a little bit. It wasn't quite influenced as much, but she saw it around her. So everybody was working on projects in their house, sewing, embroidery, stitching, woodworking, boat building. Everybody was doing some sort of creative expression in their life. And so what I wanted to do with this one is just kind of ask around and ask you what you witnessed when you were growing up from the elders around you or like your immediate parents.
I grew up in Utica, New York, and my mom's family was the closest, and my Italian grandmother, I remember learning to cook next to her.
Yeah. Everybody knows Italian food is the best.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my mom also drew a bit, but there wasn't like a lot of crafts in the home.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time at my great-grandparents.
Okay.
And they had a very small house, and she was a seamstress.
Yeah.
She made wedding dresses in
Oh.
particular. So I remember the lace and the beads and
Yeah.
her commercial sewing machine.
Did she ever have you play with it, or were you ever able to
She
just
would
kind
make
of?
us doll clothes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was always there for us.
Encourage that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What about for you?
What you just said is really interesting, because I guess I never think of what I did, like sewing and all that, as being art.
It all is.
I know, and I used to embroider,
Yeah.
but I never thought of it as being an artist. So my passions would be, I did a lot of cooking when I was at a young age,
Yeah.
and the embroidery, knitting,
Yeah.
and I live in Tustin, California,
Uh-huh.
so that's very close to
Yeah.
Loma Linda.
Yeah. It's really fun right there. What about for you, sir?
Just trying to think, grandparents, parents, grandma. My grandmother and my dad's side cooked a lot, but we were always hunting and fishing also.
Mm-hmm.
Not really artwork, and I actually grew up using a sewing machine and building things for hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
So just purely practical
Just-
things.
Yep. And hands, but
Yeah.
it's all, it's you're working with that creative flow there. What about for you?
I grew up on a farm, and we were always repairing things, repairing the ladders and the
Yeah.
machinery, and repairing shoes, stitching leather to put the shoes back
Yeah.
together, things like that.
My mother was a professional artist, and my grandmother dabbled in art and painting and so forth.
Yeah.
So my mother went to college, which I can't remember what the name of it was then, in Boston. And when she got out, it was during the war, and so she was doing a lot of ads and so forth for department stores and
Yeah.
the like. And then when it was over and they came down to Florida, she started, I guess, working with different artists who sort of, became mentors of her. And then she started dabbling in oils and then watercolors.
So you grew up immersed in all of that.
And then she went into handmade paper,
Yeah.
and then there was, fiber. Before that was even plexiglass sculptures and things.
Yeah.
But I remember coming back from Boston with her, carrying 5-gallon pails of paper pulp.
Oh,
And
okay.
this was before TSA,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And it was interesting.
Yeah.
And so, but she had pieces that she sold, especially the paperwork, different parts of the world and, parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so good. Yeah.
But she wasn't selling anything for
Yeah.
millions.
Yeah. But immersed in it. Yeah.
My mom was super musical, so she played tons of instruments, and I think she would often be like playing the piano and encouraging us to like sing along or
Yeah.
play whatever instruments we were learning.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Yeah. What about you, Julie?
Well, Tina, you heard the whole story yesterday. I met her just when she got into town, which was great. Anyway, I grew up in a small city in the Midwest, and my parents both grew up on the farm, and so we were kind of in between the city and the farm, so it was a great life for a kid to just jump on our bikes and go to the city and go to the pool, or go out and play on the farm and out in the country and stuff. But there wasn't a lot of arts and crafts. My parents were, mom sewed and cooked and did all those practical things, and dad took care of all the practical things. But and then I was sent to Catholic schools and taught by the nuns, and they were very strict, and we really never got to do art. Really didn't do music and art like the kids do now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very deprived, as you can tell. Anyway, and then if everybody in the class was good, we might get to do an art project on Friday. And, but that's only if everybody was good. And of course, as we know, everybody isn't always good. And then you would just copy something, you would just look at the teacher's picture, and then you were supposed to copy it. Anyway, you can tell I just didn't get any stimulation or any exposure to any of it, or music either. I mean, we played, I heard lots of polka music, and, because this was Wisconsin, and all that. I mean, I wasn't totally deprived, I'm just kidding, but I think there's always been an artist inside of me, and I always wanted to do that, do that. I wanted to find out what that was about. And anyway, so I went off to college, and I took art classes among all the other requirements and things. But then it got really expensive because the teachers wanted us to go and buy all these special materials, and I was putting myself through college, so I couldn't really afford it. Plus, it was very time consuming, but I got a little taste. And anyway, so I stopped taking the art classes and just did what I was supposed to do. And then I went on and then I ended up living the rest of my life, most of my life in Alaska. And at one point, I was a VISTA volunteer. Well, it was the year that VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, became AmeriCorps. And with that year of service, they gave me an educational grant, like several $1,000s for my education. Well, I already had my education, I had my degree, and so I did my service, AmeriCorps service, at a small college up on the Kenai Peninsula. And so I took, and I was living really close there, and so I took the money that they gave me, and I just took all the art classes at that college, and I was just in my glory.
Good.
It was just so
Good.
fun. Yeah.
I'm glad you did that finally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with that kind of like mulling in your head, so that's kind of what got me spinning in this whole direction, was like, what do I want to talk about? What lights me up, and what kind of helped me survive my youth? And it was beading, and then realizing that we had it culturally immersed in our day-to-day life. I grew up watching my grandma was constantly knitting socks, or she was stitching something, or she was putting together, so let's flip to the next slide. So utilizing the designs. So this is her pattern on a fancy parka that she made. I actually have another one of her patterns tattooed traditionally on my arm because she was a master skin sewer. I mean, the designs that she came up with, the full utguks that she made, each one was unique. Each one was, I mean, it's museum quality that we have in our homes, so it's beautiful to look at. So what I like to do is utilizing those old traditional patterns and designs and looking at all the work that she did and then incorporating them into kind of my modern patterns that I utilize in my beadwork. And this is a design, that speaks to more than just Yupik people. Inupiaq people, they're called Cupell'aq. So the patterns that they have, they're Cupell'aq, and they're kind of like all over in like northern Canadian territory as well as Greenlandic territory. These patterns, they kind of exist up there and speak to people and create that nostalgia. So I spend my time, kind of studying, learning about the patterns and the textures, and then figuring out ways I can incorporate it into my like modern pieces that I produce that can kind of speak to many people besides just Yupik people. So the Cupell'aq pattern, it's translated as the quilt-like pattern, and it's sewn calf skin and used on the trim of parkas or biluhuks or muklaks. And so that's kind of the term that it is, so Cupell'aq. So a lot of my pieces are titled with that, a Basanti Cupell'aq series or Color Me Time Cupell'aq series. And so it all kind of has that incorporated in there. So sliding those traditional patterns into modern art. So I kind of was talking about that, and just figuring out ways as an artist today. So as an artist today, I'm not just an artist that is here in Alaska, in Anchorage, that just people here are seeing. We're on social media now, so we're worldwide, we're global. Like people from all over are watching, our patterns that we're making. And so what I love to do for my own practice, and also encouraging other like Alaska Native artists to do as well, is how can you take those traditional patterns or that feel of our traditional regalia and then throw it into some kind of modern design that has like hints of the pattern. So like the black and white, this one I call it the Misty Mountain because it has some geometric shapes in there. But I like to throw in that black and white pattern as an homage to the Cupell'aq, So it's always kind of incorporated in there. But this is a design that a lot of people can just kind of look at and understand and come up with their own theory of what it means. I had people that say, oh, it looks like an ice cream cone that's falling off. I don't know. There's all kinds of stories that they can come up with as to what it looks like. So sharing them with others and creating art that speaks to more than just your cultural heritage. So that's kind of one of the bases of me and my art business, I guess I can say. They're not just our designs. Oh yes, so they're not just our designs. So I actually it wasn't one of you that came up and told me. It was somebody yesterday that came up. It was a blur. I met so many people yesterday, and somebody came up and they said they were down in Africa, in South Africa, and there was jewelry, like beaded jewelry in the store. And she said there was a bunch of patterns that were very similar to this. And so these are like indigenous South African tribes that have very similar geometric shapes. She said they use black, white, and red. And so the designs, they're not just ours. They're shared throughout. And so just keeping that global nostalgia and speaking to everybody, and just having it open to all who can just kind of see it and have like their own story behind it and not just here. So modern indigenous is art for all. So I kind of already spoke to that a little bit, but I put that, so that was what I held up right there. That's a little bit clearer picture of that piece that I held up. So again, that's my Misty Mountain design with the little homage to the Dumukjuk on the side there. It comes, this is a fun big size that I did, but the earrings are usually kind of smaller. And so they run around Anchorage. There's a lot of, I'm a nurse at the hospital, and there's a lot of nurses that have my earrings. And so they're running around the hospital wearing the Misty Mountains and in all different color patterns and everything. So again, just making art speak to more than just your Indigenous people, but speaking to all people. I feel like art is such a translation. It's such a great opportunity to take the things that you've learned and the things that have nurtured you as an artist or as a human, really, and laying something out, whether that be a painting or beadwork or mask, carving, anything like that, and sharing it with the world, but also kind of keeping in mind, keeping them involved in the story too. So not having something that's kind of closed off where other people can't express their wants or dreams or desires through your piece of art, right? You're always trying to evoke emotion in whatever it is that you're producing. And so, again, I like to just try and keep it nice and wide and broad and open to everybody. So, kind of going back a little bit and thinking about, what I learned before, like what kind of drove my history to becoming an artist. And it was that grandpa I never knew, but I know because my grandmother talked about him all the time. So this was a man who grew up taking care of his elders in his community, melting snow for a couple select elders who didn't have sons to do it for her, a couple female elders, clearing the path, but also not just clearing the path. And she made an emphasis on this. He didn't just clear the path. He made sure that the sides were nice and cut. It wasn't just bikjakdun, that means anyhow in Yupik, she would say that, not bikjakdun. So you would make sure that the sides are nice and clear. So this whole lesson that she was teaching me was when you move forward in life and you choose to do things, you do it with care and you put a lot of energy into making it look nice. And it's the quality of the work. And by putting the quality of that work in, the world, the universe or energy will then take care of you. So at the bottom there I put, he ran a very successful general store that he started in Nunuk. Started out as a fur trade business, and then he turned it into a grocery store. Very successful the whole time that he was alive. And he took care of the community, and he took care of his family, and in return, they all took care of him. So it was just kind of that circling back. So with that concept. So put love and care into your work. And so as an artist today, right, we see art everywhere. And we have gift shops that have all kinds of stuff, and everybody has access to tools and can kind of do things. And getting back to just making sure that you put that love and that quality care into the things that are out in the community. So take your time when you work and work towards the quality. And then she would always tell me to be humble. Yupiks are very humble. We're not like a braggy, I don't know, that's how I grew up. I think I got my butt kicked a couple times by my cousins if I was getting a little too braggy about things. So we're really taught to just kind of keep to ourselves and be humble about our work. And then she would always stress too to not try and be a perfectionist. That sometimes, when she's skin sewing or she's doing things, there's a little flaw. There's a little flaw in it, and it's okay. That you take that flaw and you learn how to work with it and you grow from it. She was a very wise lady. I miss her. I was 12 when she passed, and it was devastating. So, the environment knows your energy, kind of circling back to my grandpa's story. Be careful about the energy she would talk about. Be careful about the energy that you're putting into your work because it's going to be carried in that work. So if you're making something and you have anger or hateful energy or whatever, that's going to flow through your fingertips into that piece of work. and then it's gonna carry on to somebody else, and they might absorb that energy. So I find myself quite often, I utilize beadwork to help me kind of get into a creative meditative state. If I'm working through something though, I will choose to work on a separate project that is not going to be delivered to the community, if that makes sense. So I'll put all of my bad juju into that, and maybe I just like pocket that or trash it. Quite often those are the items that like I get to the end and a bead breaks, and so it's garbage anyways, you know, I can't send it out. But it's weird how that energy just kind of translates into beadwork. And then all the stuff that I have that goes out into the community, I try to make sure I have a lot of love and a lot of like gratitude and thankfulness and all that into those pieces, in hopes that it'll just spread all over the place. So healing yourself is healing others. So another thing that I found in kind of reflecting on beadwork and art in general is I grew up in rural Alaska. I didn't know this at the time, but beading was my meditation, and beading was my retreat. And being able to complete bead projects and go out and sell them and make other people happy around me was my sense of accomplishment that I would get, and this kind of little sense of self-pride as well. So as an adult, looking back at the things that I experienced, because there was addiction and there was domestic violence and there was all kinds of things going on around me, and wondering what it was that kind of made me resilient, what brought me through all that chaos. And it really was reflective on my art and my beading, and just being able to have something that was tangible as like an outlet that I can utilize. And so I've done a lot of work on myself. I have 2 beautiful daughters that are 18, and I try not to pass on the generational trauma. And so, you know, doing a lot of work in healing, and then kind of spreading that energy out there and teaching others to do the same thing with this kind of creative meditative process. Let's see. And then going back again. And looking back on the first question that I asked you, did you see your aunts and uncles, your grandparents working with their hands, or embroidering, or stitching, or cooking, you know, doing something? They utilize this creative, like, mind process as a mental health clarity, you know. And looking now today, I'm not trying to sound, you know, whatever, but we have social media and all this stuff. I mean, it's instant gratification. We have Temu and Amazon and all this stuff, and if we want something, we order it and we get it now, and we do this. And we've really lost touch of looking back and seeing what it is that is your creative meditative process that helps you heal just like everyday, day-to-day complications that could arise. And that's what they did back then, as they found, and maybe they didn't even know that that was what was happening to them in the process. But looking back, you can see that it was a really beautiful thing that they didn't even know they were doing for themselves. So kind of circling back to that, utilizing art in everyday life. Oops. So again, just kind of going back to kind of that healing process, and then also with the work that I've done for myself and kind of healing my own self, and then just being reflective on like the benefits of bead weaving. Then I'm able to show up for other artists, or I'm able to show up for other people in my community and just share this bit of information, this bit of history with them, in hopes that they could also start to kind of micro-heal themselves through this. What do they say, right? Put your oxygen mask on before helping others. So put your own mask on before you start to help others. So pass it on. My grandmother also taught me that, is that when you know something and you've learned something and you've gained knowledge from an elder, think of another way that you can pass that on, as long as you have the patience. There are some people that are not teachers. So I have a couple aunts that I've asked, like, hey, can you show me this? And they cannot teach. It's not in their nature. So I just put in there, you know, if you have that knowledge and you have the patience to share, to pass it on. and spreading that creative energy to get, again, help heal the process. So continuing to grow, and the community will grow with you. So I'll just leave it open. Do you guys have any questions right now of anything that I spoke about? Yes, sir.
Where do you get your beads? Are they,
I get my beads from this beautiful bead shop in Anchorage. It's called the Cupell'aq, and Miss Laura is the owner of this shop. And going to Energy, this lady does not let anybody else run her shop. If she is out of town, the shop is closed. And the reason being is because she doesn't want bad energy in her beads. She's very woo-woo, and I love it. You know, like you walk in and you feel the energy and the love in the store, and the way the beads are set up is just beautiful. And so again, not just my creating, but I buy my beads from her because she puts so much love into her shop and her store.
they're going back to your grandparents or?
Oh, where they got them?
Yeah.
They got them from trade. So traditionally it was trade beads. So they worked with a lot of, we had a lot of Russian blues. So if you see really old stuff, you'll see this beautiful kind of turquoise blue bead, and that they call it the Russian blue. I don't think they make them anymore, those ones. So it's just you have to find them. So it was trade beads.
So it wasn't something that they created, it was a trade?
It was a trade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of the last earrings you showed on the PowerPoint had sort of a orange, red, bright upper portion, and it came down to blues, green, yes.
This one. Yeah.
Are those, it almost seems like they're sort of modern influence, or maybe even a Southwest influence. Do you
know
get
those,
influence from other areas?
well, not for those. No, not usually. So those ones, I call them my salmonberry poppy. Yeah. So in my head, I was just I wanted to do some kind of abstract Picasso, something, and so those are the salmonberry poppy. And then I also have them in a salmonberry lupin. So I have it with the colors there, the green and the purple. Yeah.
What is the one with the fur and the pieces of yarn, I think? Yes, those.
Okay, so that is the utguk. So that's a fancy parka that my grandmother made.
Oh, okay.
So that one will be mine. It's my mom's. My grandma made it for her, and then it passed.
I couldn't tell if they were gloves or what.
Yeah, so that
As a
part is
sleeve?
yep, the seam right there. So it's like the breast part of
Okay.
the utguk. Mm-hmm.
And is that yarn or is
It is,
other
yeah.
strips of?
No, it's yarn, and it's those represent houseflies.
Mm.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So then we have them on our biluluks as well, or our mukluks. So you'll have them off the side, and there's they call it jiva something, which jiva is a housefly.
Mm.
Not
I wish I knew why, but
Not mosquitoes?
not mosquito one. No.
And is it beaded or is it embroidered?
So it's embroidered and beaded.
And
So then that one would be, I think she used rickrack. So it's
Okay.
a tiny rickrack. And then traditionally they would embroider it. You kind of have this, like a red yarn or thread, and you would sew it in that rickrack pattern. But she used rickrack for that one. Yeah.
so was rickrack, like you have it on your
Mhm.
shirt, it seems very traditional thing, almost like, was it a trade item back then?
I feel like it might have been, but I don't, because I have a couple older bus bucks that also have it, but it might have been from the 70s, so maybe not the 20s or 30s. I don't see, a lot of the really old bus bucks, they just won't have any of this, they'll just be the fabric
Well,
pieces.
with my great-grandma, I remember a lot of rickrack
Mhm.
things back then.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was
Maybe
just
a little
more
bit.
prominent back then.
Maybe
or
that
if
was
it
the fancy,
Yeah.
bus buck, if you had rickrack. Yeah.
I have
question. I'm sorry if you've already shared this, but what does your Yupik name translate to in English?
We don't have translations for Yupik names.
Okay.
So they're actual names.
Names.
Now my grandma, her Yupik name, Naroshap, is weasel. So she was named after the weasel by a shaman. So she's the oldest in her family. The 2 babies before her had died at birth. So my great grandmother had 2 one stillborn and one that passed shortly after. And so for Naroshap's birth, Elena, they had a shaman present at the birth. And then when a shaman is present during the birth, they usually give a name of an animal. And they pick an animal that they feel is going to protect the baby. And so he picked weasel because it was cunning and it could kind of get away with anything. You know, the weasel's just very like smart and can kind of dodge things coming at it. So to kind of help with that.
And then I've got a follow-up comment/question. So you work as an ICU nurse,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And so your job is literally to heal people at the worst time in their life.
Yeah.
And you pour all this good energy into what you make and send out. Are you from a line of healers? Are there healers in your lineage?
I don't know, but the last healer, I don't know if you've heard of Rita Blumenstein. So Rita was a very, very good friend of our family's and like a distant relative. And so I grew up with Rita. So she told me I was little and she grabbed my hands and she goes, "You have healer hands," you know, and she was just really cute, little old lady. And she told me that I had healing hands and that I needed to do something along those lines with it. So, and because a shaman was present at my grandmother's birth, there's supposed to be some, you know, magic there. So, I don't know.
Your color, can you tell me a little bit more about your inspiration and how you use your eyes and what you see and how it goes through your body out into your work?
Like with all these?
Yes.
I don't know, you know, and then I was thinking about that too because I know I was going to talk about like kind of color creation and color patterns. I don't like, I find myself not really liking neon, so I won't throw that in there, but I'm very seasonal with my colors. And so going into the winter, I do more of the Dumakchuk series, you know, I do more of the black and white, the patterns, the geometric. And then when spring comes around, I'm all about like the bright colors again. And so it's like just trying to get out there and like invite the flowers and all the growth and everything that's coming from that. I don't know, that's kind of my inspiration.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
How about your earrings? Sorry, did you make those? Or?
No, I don't know who made these.
Oh.
I know, I actually made a post about it, seeing if anybody knew who made them. So I bought them in Bethel. There's the museum in Bethel, they have a small gift shop. And I always try to go there and get some earrings or get something from the local artist. This one did not have an artist name on it, and the cashier couldn't tell me who it was. I wish I knew, so I can give them a shout out every time somebody says something.
Do you know what the design is? Is it
Just flowers.
flowers?
Yeah, just pretty flowers. Any more questions?
Well, thank you so much.
What is the fur on the garment that you're showing on the PowerPoint there?
Oh.
The background.
Well, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. Yeah. I know there's Wolverine on the ruff, and then the calf is the white, but I'm not exactly sure what the base is. Usually it's a squirrel coat, but that's not squirrel. So
And the white part, where is the white part come on your body?
right here, it's on the breast part.
And is it kind of separate from the?
So then when it's zipped up, you kind of have this white right here. And then some little white flaps that come down. There's the ones at the bottom. Yeah.
And there is a parka in the gallery, if anyone's interested in looking at it, that has some of those similar designs and the housefly yarn pieces hanging down. Happy to show you.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's the last one.
Oh my gosh.
Is that yours? then?
I did that, yeah, I should have clicked over to that one. That I did for the, oh my gosh, why am I spacing? Mary Peltola campaign.
And is it a necklace or just
It's-
for,
it's
just
a hanging
like a-
piece, yeah, it's Denali,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
It was 14,000 beads. It was about, yeah, so it's larger than it looks, so it's about this big. It was about 52 hours of work.
Wow.
And do you sit down and like not want to stop once you get
Sometimes,
started?
yeah. Or sometimes I stand. Like I brought my extendable thing. You know, I get
Oh,
tired of
yes,
sitting
yes,
sometimes. I don't want to
yes,
get
yes.
that bead butt. So, so I use this, and you know, I used it a couple times with that, working with. Yeah.
But once you get into it, it's like, oh my gosh.
I kind of zone out with
Yeah.
an audiobook or a podcast or something, and.
And do you stick with one thing before or do you go back and forth?
I try to do batches of the same because I get into a rhythm, you know, especially with these really colorful ones. So with these ones, I have like 13 different bead colors out in one go. And so I try to do a batch, you know, big batch of that while I have all those so I'm not putting away and taking out all the colors.
You actually count the number of beads, or
What was that?
you actually count the number of beads?
With this one I did. Yeah, I was curious. Well, it was like, you know, I had how many rows and I knew how many, so it was just perfectly the rows, and I was like, oh, that's 14,000 beads.
Do you grid it out then first?
This one I did, yeah.
What is the symbol on the upper right?
So that's Cupell'aq. It's a Yupik symbol, and it basically means kind of like in harmony with the earth. And so each one of those is like, you know, fire, earth, water, air, and it's just having your soul be in alignment with the earth, and that's what Mary Peltola uses as her symbol, which I was happy to see. I was like, oh good, that's great, because it's a Yupik symbol.
Does it have a name?
Cupell'aq.
I thought that was like symbols.
Oh, yeah.
In general, but that one is particulars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where is that piece now?
They auctioned it off, I believe. Have you been to Fire Island Bakery in Anchorage? It's a bakery that's been around for a long time, and the owner, she was the one that got it. Because I asked him, I was like, who got it? You know, like, who got this in the silent auction? Yeah. And
She
she was,
doesn't actually have the bakery on Fire Island, does she?
oh no, yeah. It's downtown. There's like a couple locations, so, yeah.
If there are no other questions, let's give Tina a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out and listening to me.